Oh, I have decided to do this live stream because there's not much time between me and wherever I've got to be today. So, yeah, the non-disclosure agreements. The government have decided to say that non-disclosure agreements are going to be irrelevant in the case of sexual and racial harassment. So this has come off the back of Weinstein and Philip Green, and they're basically saying that in cases of racial sexual harassment, non-disclosure agreements will no longer apply. This is quite interesting, but at the same time, it's not getting very much coverage. Philip Green's on the front page of The Sun today, and then if you look at the double-page spread 4-5, there's pictures of him with one of his staff on his knee, him calling her naughty, full of booze, touching her hair. It's obviously harassment. And then afterwards, the editorial says, The Sun says, these NDAs are terrible and the government are doing something about it. So the Sun's obviously on the side of the government. They're against NDAs, but at the same time, Murdoch, who owns the Sun, has settled out of court with loads of people in the Leveson phone hacking inquiry cases. So Leveson 2 was dropped, where the full inquiry into all of the extent of the criminality of Murdoch will no longer really be investigated, and that needs to be revived. So that's NDAs from the perspective of press regulation, but there's also NDAs that are being used by banks against people that have been victims of bank misbehavior, fraud and criminality. And all of these NDAs are a sign that non-disclosure agreements are not being used to protect intellectual property or trade secrets. They're instead being used to protect the reputations of the large, powerful banks and corporations and individuals in the case of Harvey Weinstein and Philip Green. So it's reputations that they're now being used for. So that's mission creep. They're supposed to protect inventors, but instead they are being used to protect criminal behavior. The Select Committee for Women and Equalities will be receiving evidence this week from the Whistleblowers UK and Whistleblowing All-Party Parliamentary Group head Georgina Halford Hall, which I think is going to say something along the lines of, what I've just told you about the mission creep, and that something needs to be done about it. Let's see whether or not any of this momentum actually picks up and people start talking about this stuff. Today, the Institute, basically the Child Sexual Abuse Inquiry, will see evidence given to it by MI5, I think, and other people. Whereas NDAs have been expanded in their scope from intellectual property to reputation, the inquiry that Theresa May set up into child sexual abuse, it's had its terms narrowed massively. So it's no longer about whether paedophilia took place and the degree to which the authorities knew about it or were complicit in it, participating in it even, in the case of, for example, Cyril Smith, Jimmy Savile, the Kincora Northern Ireland cases. Instead, it's just about the way in which the police and politicians reacted. You could say the press as well, because they've obviously got a lot of information too. So it's really about whitewashing the whole thing and getting them off scot-free. They've spent massive amounts of money on publicity. Their press team is big. They take out adverts on national television. So they have a huge budget. They're under the Home Office. And obviously they don't want to do anything. On Radio 4 this morning, they didn't, and the BBC Breakfast, they didn't say anything about the NDA story, the non-disclosure agreement, even though it was on the websites of all the papers because the government had released a press release. But they did, on Radio 4 Today programme, talk about the child sexual abuse inquiry, and they also spoke about the women who tricked into entering into relationships with undercover police, and how the police knew about that higher up and they okayed it. So they're now saying that the higher up police should be done for conspiracy to rape. And these facts were known at the same time. So the paedophilia was going on, the conspiracy to rape was going on. Theresa May would have known about all of this, supposedly historical stuff, and covered it all up. So that's bad. And at the same time, the main story is the funds that the Prime Minister is releasing for the Northern Labour Leave constituencies, many of which would have been where the child sexual abuse would have taken place. So, yeah, we definitely have a Prime Minister who's not only soft on child abuse, but then afterwards pays off the representatives of the victims. So that is the MPs, the Labour MPs that have a duty to protect the paedophile victims, the victims of paedophilia, child sex abuse victims. So those MPs, they're supposed to protect those victims, but in actual fact, they're taking bungs from Theresa May to keep her in office and keep her happy. So it's absolutely disgusting. And if those Labour MPs take that money, then that's really in the long term what they're doing. They're protecting paedophiles, just like Theresa May, which we're obviously quite used to, but for some reason not many people say out loud. But yeah, that's the state of affairs today. Today, this afternoon, we're going to also go to the Heretical Finance Reading Group, which is monthly. It's the first one of the year. We're looking at Cathy O'Neill's book, Weapons of Math Destruction, which has a sort of NDA link in the sense that it talks about the auditing of algorithms. The book came out about 2 years ago, but there are statistical models that are used in order to make decisions about whether or not you can borrow money, about whether or not you go to prison, about how long you stay in prison. This is in the US and the UK, credit scores, all type of stuff, what adverts you see. These proprietary black box codes are treated as though they're intellectual property by some of these companies, but at the same time they have a massive impact on social justice. So again, asymmetric information, so lack of equal opportunities in terms of access to information, leads to social inequality and social injustice. This is a problem. Not enough people are talking about it, again, because the press likes to dumb things down so that we don't notice them. Instead, they start talking about how we should regulate YouTube and Facebook, which is obviously a good idea, but they don't want to be regulated themselves. I'm going to stop going on now and wish you a good day. Bye.